The train lurched to a violent stop that sent Beatrice Kendall sprawling across the velvet bench seat, her carefully pinned auburn hair coming loose as her head struck the wooden window frame. Blood roared in her ears while screams erupted throughout the passenger car. And when she finally managed to pull herself upright, all she could see through the frost-covered window was an impenetrable wall of white that seemed to swallow the world whole. Everyone remained calm. The conductor's voice barely carried over the rising panic as passengers stumbled into the aisle. We've hit a snowdrift. The engineer is assessing the situation. Beatrice pressed trembling fingers to her temple where a knot was already forming. The December cold seeped through every crack in the car, despite the potbelly stove glowing orange in the corner. She had been traveling from San Francisco to her sister's home in Denver, a journey that should have taken her through the Sierra Nevada mountains without incident. The year was 1878, and the railroad companies had promised safe winter passage. Those promises now seemed as substantial as the snow swirling outside. "Miss, are you hurt?" An elderly woman across the aisle leaned forward, concern etching deeper lines into her weathered face. "I will be fine, thank you." Beatrice forced a smile despite the throbbing in her head. She smoothed her traveling dress, a practical wool garment in deep blue that her mother had insisted would be suitable for the journey. Her mother, who was now 3 days behind her in San Francisco, recovering from the influenza that had prevented her from making this trip to see Beatrice's sister before the baby arrived. The conductor returned 20 minutes later, his mustache crusted with ice and his expression grim. "Ladies and gentlemen, I must inform you that we are stranded. The storm has created drifts 15 feet high across the tracks both ahead and behind us. The telegraph wires are down. We have no way to communicate our position." A woman near the front of the car began to weep. Beatrice felt her own stomach clench with fear, but she forced herself to breathe slowly. Panic would solve nothing. "How long?" a man demanded from the back. "Unknown, sir. Could be days before rescue comes. We are roughly 20 miles from the nearest town, and in these conditions, no one can reach us." The conductor cleared his throat. "We have coal for the stoves for perhaps 3 days, if we are conservative. Food is more concerning. The dining car has supplies for another day, maybe 2 if we ration carefully." Beatrice's practical mind began calculating. 20 passengers in this car alone, and she had seen at least 2 other passenger cars when boarding. That was 60 people or more, not counting the crew. Limited food, limited heat, and winter in the Sierra Nevada could be deadly. The first day passed in a blur of discomfort and growing hunger. The railroad staff distributed thin soup and hardtack, portions so small they barely took the edge off Beatrice's appetite. She had never known real hunger before. Her father was a successful merchant in San Francisco, and she had grown up with full meals and the security of knowing more would always come. This taste of deprivation unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. By the second day, the portions had shrunk again. The coal supply was dwindling faster than anticipated, and passengers huddled together for warmth. The storm showed no signs of abating. Wind howled around the train like a living thing, and snow piled so high against the windows that daylight became a dim gray suggestion. Beatrice sat wrapped in every shawl and blanket she possessed, trying to ignore the hollow ache in her belly. The elderly woman across from her, Mrs. Patterson, had fallen into a fitful sleep, her breathing shallow and concerning. Several other passengers had developed symptoms of illness, whether from the cold or from despair, Beatrice could not say. She must have dozed off because she woke to shouting from outside the train. For a moment, disoriented and stiff from cold, she thought rescue had arrived. Then she heard the conductor's voice, sharp with alarm. "Sir, you cannot take railroad property. Your people are starving." The voice that answered was deep, rough as gravel, with an edge that suggested the speaker would not be easily deterred. "I have been watching this train for a day now. If I do not hunt, they will die." Beatrice pressed her face to the window, scraping away frost with her fingernail. Through the swirling snow, she could barely make out two figures near the supply car. One was definitely the conductor, his railroad uniform visible even in the storm. The other was larger, dressed in heavy furs and leather that made him seem more animal than man. "We have no way to pay you," the conductor protested. "Did I ask for payment?" The larger figure moved, and Beatrice caught a glimpse of his face. Strong features, weathered by wind and sun. A thick beard covered his jaw, and dark hair hung past his shoulders, plastered to his head by snow. Even from this distance, even through the inadequate window, she could see the power in his build. This was not a man softened by city living. "I need ammunition," the stranger continued. "Powder and shot. I know the railroad keeps supplies. Give me what I need, and I will bring back meat." The conductor hesitated, then nodded. He disappeared into the supply car and emerged moments later with a leather pouch. The stranger took it, tested its weight, and then turned toward the wilderness. He moved with surprising grace for a man of his size, and within moments the storm had swallowed him completely. "Who was that?" Beatrice asked when the conductor returned to their car, stamping snow from his boots. "Mountain man, I expect. Some of them still trap in these ranges, though the beaver trade is mostly finished." The conductor's expression was doubtful. "If he does bring back game, it will be a miracle. Most men would not venture into a storm like this, even with their lives depending on it." But most men, Beatrice was learning, were not mountain men. The stranger returned at dusk on the third day. Beatrice heard the commotion and joined the crowd of passengers pressing toward the windows. The man who emerged from the storm was crusted in ice and snow. But across his shoulders he carried the carcass of an elk, a massive animal that must have weighed as much as he did. The cheer that went up from the passengers was weak but genuine. Beatrice felt tears sting her eyes. Food. Real food. The thought of warm meat made her dizzy with longing. The railroad staff butchered the elk behind the supply car while the mountain man stood watch, and soon the smell of roasting meat filled the passenger cars. When the conductor distributed portions, Beatrice ate slowly, savoring every bite. It was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted, and she knew that had less to do with the preparation and everything to do with the fact that she had not realized how close to the edge of desperation she had been. "The man who brought the elk?" she asked the conductor. "Has he left?" "No, miss. He is sheltering in the engine car. Says he will hunt again tomorrow, if the storm allows." Beatrice did not understand why she felt compelled to seek him out. Perhaps it was simple gratitude. Perhaps it was the nagging sense that she should thank the person who had very likely saved her life. Or perhaps it was something else. Some pull she did not have words for. She wrapped her heaviest cloak around her shoulders, made her way forward through the train, passing through the dining car and into the engine car, where heat from the firebox made the air almost comfortable. The mountain man sat on the floor near the fire, working oil into a rifle with methodical attention. He looked up as she entered, and Beatrice found herself frozen under the intensity of his gaze. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray and penetrating. Up close, she could see the true measure of him. He was enormous. Not just tall, but built with the kind of muscle that came from years of hard physical labor. His hands on the rifle were scarred and calloused, and she could see the ridge of old wounds along his knuckles. His hair, now dry, fell in dark waves past his shoulders. He would have looked brutal if not for something in his expression, a wariness that spoke of intelligence and careful observation. "I wanted to thank you," Beatrice said, finding her voice. "For the elk, for helping us." He studied her for a long moment before responding. "No need for thanks. Could not let you starve." His voice matched the rest of him, rough and low. Beatrice noticed he did not move to stand, did not observe the usual courtesies of rising when a lady entered. Mountain manners, she supposed, or perhaps simple practicality in the cramped space. "May I know your name?" "I am Beatrice Kendall." Another pause. His eyes traveled over her face, and she had the uncomfortable sense that he was cataloging every detail about her. "Kade Quinn." "You live in these mountains, Mr. Quinn?" "Just Quinn is fine." He returned his attention to the rifle. "Have a cabin about 8 miles north. Saw the train when the storm hit. Figured you would need help eventually." 8 miles in that storm. Beatrice tried to imagine making such a journey, and failed. That was quite a distance to travel in such conditions. Been in worse. He set the rifle aside and reached for his coat, which was drying near the firebox. "Storm is clearing. We'll go out again tomorrow." "Will there be more elk?" "Maybe. Deer, if not. Something." He glanced at her again, and this time his expression shifted slightly. Not quite concern, but something close. "You hit your head when the train stopped. Still bothering you?" Beatrice touched the bruise on her temple, surprised he had noticed. "How did you know?" "Way you move. Careful, like it hurts." He pulled a small tin from his coat pocket and held it out. "Salve, pine tar and other things. Good for bruises and keeping cuts from infection." She took the tin, their fingers brushing for the briefest moment. His hands were warm despite the cold he had been traveling through. "Thank you." Quinn nodded and turned back to his rifle maintenance. Beatrice recognized a dismissal when she saw one, but she found herself reluctant to leave. There was something compelling about this man, this stranger who had risked his life for people he did not know. "Why?" she asked. "Why help us?" He was silent for so long she thought he would not answer. Then, still focused on his work, he said, "Because I could. Does not seem right to let people die when you can do something about it." It was the simplest answer imaginable, and somehow the most profound. Beatrice stood there a moment longer, then quietly retreated back to her passenger car. That night, lying on the bench seat with Mrs. Patterson snoring softly across the aisle, she found her thoughts returning again and again to the mountain man with storm-gray eyes. Quinn was true to his word. Over the next 3 days, he brought back 2 deer and another, smaller elk. The passengers no longer faced starvation, though the cold remained a constant enemy and the coal supply continued to dwindle. The storm had finally broken, leaving a landscape of pristine white that was beautiful and treacherous in equal measure. Beatrice saw Quinn each time he returned with game, though he never lingered among the passengers. He would deliver the meat to the conductor, exchange a few terse words, and then disappear back into the wilderness. She found herself watching for him, making excuses to be near the windows when she thought he might return. On the 5th day of being stranded, she was helping Mrs. Patterson with her knitting, listening to the older woman's stories of her grandchildren, when the conductor appeared in their car looking harried. "Miss Kendall, I wonder if I might have a word?" Curious, Beatrice followed him to the space between cars, where the cold wind made her pull her cloak tighter. "It is about Quinn," the conductor said, his breath fogging in the air. "He has requested to speak with you." Her heart stuttered. With me? Why? He would not say, but he is at the engine car, and he specifically asked for you by name. The conductor's expression was difficult to read. You do not have to go, miss. Mountain men can be unpredictable. But Beatrice was already moving forward. She found Quinn in the same spot as before, but this time he stood when she entered, a concession to manners that surprised her. Miss Kendall. He seemed uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Need to speak plain with you. Of course. Storm is gone, but the snow is deep. Rescue will not come for days yet, maybe a week or more. The coal will not last. He met her eyes directly. People will start dying of cold, the old ones first, then the sick. Beatrice felt ice in her veins that had nothing to do with the temperature. What can be done? My cabin is 8 miles north. It is too far for most of these people in these conditions. But you could make it. I could take you there, keep you safe and warm until rescue comes. She stared at him, trying to process what he was suggesting. You want to take me to your cabin? Alone? Yes. No hesitation, no apology in his voice. That would be completely improper. My reputation would be ruined if anyone knew I had been alone with a man in such circumstances. Your reputation will not matter if you freeze to death on this train. His jaw was set, stubborn. I have been watching. You are strong, practical. You could survive the journey. Some of the others cannot. Why me specifically? Quinn was silent for a moment, and something shifted in his expression. Because I have been watching you for 5 days, and in that time, I have seen you help everyone around you. You share your blankets with the old woman. You tend the sick even though you are hungry and cold yourself. You do not complain. You do not demand special treatment. He took a step closer. And because when you look at me, you do not look afraid. Beatrice's breath caught. She had not realized how much attention he had been paying, how closely he had been observing. I cannot just abandon these people. You would not be abandoning them. I will continue to hunt, continue to bring meat. But I cannot be in 2 places at once. If you are safe at my cabin, I can focus entirely on keeping the rest of them fed. His voice dropped lower. Please, let me do this. There was something in his tone, an urgency that went beyond simple practical concern. Beatrice found herself studying his face, seeing past the beard and the weathered skin to the man beneath. He was not as old as she had first thought. Perhaps 30, maybe a year or 2 more. And his eyes, those storm gray eyes, held an expression she was beginning to recognize. He was not just concerned about the passengers. He was concerned about her specifically. If I agree, she said carefully, it would have to be with the understanding that you are acting as my protector, nothing more. I am unmarried, Mr. Quinn, and I must maintain my honor. I would never dishonor you. The words came out fierce, almost angry. I am asking to save your life, not compromise you. Beatrice believed him. She could not have said why, could not have explained the certainty that settled in her chest. But she knew with complete conviction that this man would protect her with his life, if necessary. When would we leave? Relief flashed across Quinn's face so quickly she almost missed it. Now. The weather is clear, but that may not last. We need to move while we can. Beatrice returned to her passenger car to gather her belongings, which amounted to a single carpet bag and the blankets she had been using. Mrs. Patterson caught her hand as she prepared to leave. You are going with him, the old woman said. It was not a question. Yes. He says I will be safer at his cabin. Mrs. Patterson squeezed her fingers. Be careful, child, but also be wise. Sometimes the most dangerous thing is not the risk we take, but the opportunity we refuse. Beatrice did not fully understand the old woman's meaning until much later. The journey to Quinn's cabin was the most physically demanding thing Beatrice had ever experienced. The snow was thigh-deep in places, and even with Quinn breaking trail ahead of her, she struggled with every step. He had fashioned snowshoes from branches and leather, primitive but functional, and shown her how to use them. Even so, her legs burned and her lungs ached from the cold air. Quinn moved ahead of her with steady, tireless power. He carried both his pack and her carpet bag, his rifle slung across his back. And still, he never seemed to tire. Every few minutes, he would pause and look back to check on her. And if she had fallen too far behind, he would backtrack and offer his hand to help her through a difficult section. "How much farther?" she gasped after what felt like hours. 2 miles. Can you make it?" She wanted to say no, wanted to sink into the snow and rest. But she saw the concern in his eyes and forced herself to nod. "Yes, I can make it." His hand came down on her shoulder, warm through her cloak. "You are doing well. Better than most would." The praise warmed her more than it should have. When Quinn's cabin finally came into view, Beatrice nearly wept with relief. It was a solid structure, built from rough-hewn logs and nestled against the side of a mountain in a way that provided natural shelter from the wind. Smoke rose from the chimney, which confused her until Quinn explained. "Banked the fire before I left. Should still have coals." Inside, the cabin was a single large room with a sleeping loft above. The furnishings were sparse but well made. A table, 2 chairs, a bed built into the wall, with what looked like a rope frame and a thick mattress of dried grass or moss. Furs covered the floor and hung on the walls for insulation. Supplies lined shelves on one wall, jars of preserved food and sacks of flour and cornmeal. A massive stone fireplace dominated the far wall, and true to Quinn's word, when he stirred the ashes, he found live coals beneath. Within minutes, he had a fire roaring. Beatrice stood before it, shaking with cold and exhaustion, as feelings slowly returned to her frozen extremities. "Sit," Quinn commanded, pulling one of the chairs closer to the fire. When she obeyed, he knelt and began unlacing her boots. She started to protest, but he shook his head. "Need to check for frostbite. Your feet have been in snow for 3 hours." His hands were gentle as he removed her boots and stockings, examining her feet with careful attention. His touch should have felt clinical, but Beatrice was acutely aware of the intimacy of the moment, of his large, scarred hands cradling her bare foot, his thumb tracing the arch. "No frostbite," he said finally. "You were lucky." He wrapped her feet in a fur blanket and stood, moving to the shelves. "We'll make food. You need to warm up from the inside." Beatrice watched him move around the cabin with efficient economy. He was graceful despite his size, comfortable in this space in a way he had not been on the train. This was his domain, and here he was, completely in control. He prepared a stew from dried meat and vegetables, stirring it over the fire in a cast-iron pot. The smell made Beatrice's mouth water. When he finally ladled it into wooden bowls and handed her one, she ate with unladylike speed, too hungry to care about manners. Quinn ate more slowly, watching her over the rim of his bowl. "You did well today. The journey was hard. I had no choice but to do well. There is always a choice. You could have refused to come, could have stayed on the train." Beatrice set her empty bowl aside. "Would you have left without me?" "No." The answer was immediate and certain. "Would have kept arguing until you agreed." "Why is it so important to you that I be safe?" Quinn was quiet for a long time, his gaze fixed on the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. Being alone in these mountains for 6 years. Came here after the war, after seeing too much death, too much waste. Wanted quiet, wanted peace, and I found it. He looked at her then, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. But these past 5 days, watching you on that train, I realized what I have been missing. You made me remember that there is more to life than just surviving. Beatrice felt her heart hammering against her ribs. You do not even know me. I know you are brave. I know you are kind. I know you care for others even when you are suffering yourself. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I know that when you smile at that old woman on the train, it is genuine. I know you do not put yourself above others just because you come from money. I can see it in your clothes, hear it in the way you speak. You had an easy life before this, but you have not let that make you weak or selfish. You see a great deal, she whispered. I have had little else to do but watch. The air between them felt charged, electric. Beatrice knew she should pull back, should remind him and herself of the proprieties that governed interactions between unmarried men and women. But sitting here in his cabin, warm and safe and fed, she found those rules felt distant and unimportant. Thank you, she said instead, for everything you have done, for the elk, for bringing me here, for caring whether I lived or died. Always care about that. His voice was fierce. Could not let you die. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling and the wind howling softly outside. Eventually Quinn rose and moved to the bed built into the wall. You will sleep here, he said. I will take the loft. Beatrice looked at the narrow ladder leading up to the sleeping loft above. I can manage the loft. This is your home. I should not take your bed. You are my guest. You will take the bed. His tone left no room for argument. She was too tired to fight. Quinn brought her extra furs for warmth and then climbed the ladder to the loft, disappearing from view. Beatrice undressed down to her chemise and stockings, unwilling to sleep in her full traveling dress, and crawled beneath the furs. The bed was surprisingly comfortable, and it carried Quinn's scent, pine and smoke, and something uniquely him. She buried her face in the furs and felt something in her chest loosen and warm. Above her, she could hear Quinn settling into his own bed, the ropes creaking slightly. Beatrice? His voice came from the darkness above. Yes? Sleep well. You are safe here. She believed him, and for the first time in 6 days, she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Morning came with pale sunlight filtering through the cabin's small windows. Beatrice woke to the smell of coffee and frying meat. And when she sat up, she found Quinn already dressed and working at the fire. He had his back to her, and she took the opportunity to study him in daylight. He wore a simple wool shirt that stretched tight across his shoulders and buckskin trousers that emphasized the powerful muscles of his legs. His hair was tied back with a leather cord, and she could see the strong line of his neck, the breadth of his shoulders. He was, she realized with a flutter in her stomach, magnificently built. He turned and caught her watching. Something flickered in his eyes before he looked away. Morning. Food is almost ready. Beatrice quickly dressed, grateful for the privacy as Quinn focused on his cooking. When she joined him at the table, he served her fried venison and johnny cakes with coffee so strong it nearly made her eyes water. I need to go back to the train today, Quinn said between bites. Bring more meat. Will you be all right here alone? Of course. But Quinn, You cannot keep making that journey every day. It is too dangerous, too exhausting. Have to. Those people need food. At what cost to yourself? She reached across the table and placed her hand over his. His fingers were warm and rough beneath hers. You have done more than anyone could ask. You have saved lives, including mine. But you must also take care of yourself. Quinn turned his hand over, capturing her fingers in his. His thumb traced over her knuckles. Worried about me? Yes, she admitted. I am. He smiled, a rare expression that transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made her heart skip. We'll be careful. Promise. He was gone before noon, leaving Beatrice alone in the cabin. She spent the day exploring her temporary home, finding small details that revealed more about Quinn. His shelves held not just supplies, but also books, worn volumes of Shakespeare and Longfellow that surprised her. A half-finished wood carving sat on the mantel, the shape of a hawk emerging from the block of pine. She tidied the cabin, more from a need to be useful than from any real disorder. Quinn kept his home clean and organized. She mended a tear in one of his shirts that she found draped over a chair, using the sewing kit from her carpet bag. It felt intimate, working with his clothing, pushing the needle through the heavy fabric. Quinn returned at dusk with another deer. He was covered in snow and exhausted. But his eyes lit up when he saw the cabin clean and a meal warming by the fire. Beatrice had used his supplies to make a simple stew, hoping he would not mind. You did not have to do this, he said, but his voice was pleased. I wanted to. It is the least I can do when you are working so hard. They ate together, and this time the conversation came easier. Quinn told her about his life in the mountains, the rhythms of hunting and trapping, the harsh winters and brief summers. She told him about San Francisco, about her family and her journey to see her sister. Your sister is with child? Quinn asked. Yes, her first. I wanted to be there before the baby arrived, to help her. Beatrice felt a pang of worry. She must be frantic, not knowing where I am. Rescue will come. The railroad will not abandon a train full of passengers. Give it a few more days. And then I will leave, and you will go back to your solitary life in the mountains. She said it without thinking, and only when the words were out did she realize how much the thought bothered her. Quinn's expression shuddered. Yes, I suppose so. Neither of them seemed to want to pursue that line of thought further. The days developed a pattern. Quinn would leave in the early morning to hunt and bring supplies to the train, returning in the evening exhausted but determined to continue. Beatrice would keep the cabin, preparing meals and maintaining the fire. And each evening they would share dinner and conversation. She learned that Quinn had fought in the war between the states, though he would not speak of the battles he had seen. She learned that he had grown up in Kentucky, the youngest of 5 brothers, and that he had come west seeking something he could not name. Peace, maybe, he said one evening as they sat before the fire. Or just distance from the memories. Do you ever regret coming here? Being so alone? He looked at her, the firelight casting shadows across his face. I did not until recently. The meaning in his words made her pulse quicken. On the 8th day, Quinn did not return at his usual time. Dusk came and went, then full darkness, and still no sign of him. Beatrice paced the cabin, worry gnawing at her. He had promised to be careful. He had promised. When the door finally burst open near midnight, she spun around in relief that quickly turned to alarm. Quinn stumbled inside, his face pale and his left arm hanging awkwardly at his side. What happened? She rushed to him, helping him to the chair. Wolf surprised it on the way back. It is dead, but it got me first. He gestured to his arm, and when Beatrice carefully peeled back his shredded sleeve, she saw deep claw marks gouging his shoulder and upper arm. Oh, God. Quinn, these need to be cleaned and stitched. I know. His face was gray with pain. Supplies are on the shelf. Whiskey for cleaning, needle and thread. I can talk you through it. Beatrice had never performed such a task, but she did not hesitate. She gathered what she needed and returned to Quinn, who had removed his shirt entirely. In the firelight, she could see the full extent of his injuries, and also the spectacular musculature of his chest and arms. Even injured, he was formidable. She cleaned the wounds with whiskey, and Quinn gripped the chair arm so hard the wood creaked, but he did not cry out. Then came the stitching. Her hands shook at first, but Quinn's steady voice guided her through it. Small stitches. Pull them tight. Good. Just like that. By the time she finished, she was shaking and Quinn's face was slick with sweat. She bandaged the wounds with clean cloth and then helped him to the bed, though he protested. You need the bed. I can manage the loft. Absolutely not. You are injured, and I will not argue about this. She used her firmest tone, the one she employed with stubborn patience when she had volunteered at the hospital in San Francisco. Quinn must have been more hurt than he wanted to admit, because he did not fight her. He lay back on the bed with a groan, and Beatrice pulled the furs up over him. Thank you, he whispered. You saved my life. This is the least I can do. She climbed up to the loft, but she did not sleep. Every creak, every shift from below had her alert and listening, making sure Quinn was still breathing, still alive. Near dawn, she heard him cry out softly, caught in some nightmare. Without thinking, she climbed down the ladder and went to him. He was thrashing slightly, his face contorted. She laid a hand on his forehead, finding him feverish, and spoke softly. Quinn, it is all right. You're safe. I am here. His eyes opened, unfocused and glazed with fever. Beatrice? Yes, I am here. His uninjured hand came up and caught hers, gripping tight. Do not leave. I will not. I promise. She sat beside the bed, her hand held in his, and stayed there until morning. Quinn's fever worsened over the next 2 days. Beatrice tended him as best she could, bathing his face with cool water and forcing him to drink broth when he was lucid enough to swallow. He drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes calling out in delirium, sometimes simply staring at the ceiling with glassy eyes. On the 3rd day, his fever broke. Beatrice was dozing in the chair she had pulled beside the bed when she felt his hand tighten on hers. She opened her eyes to find him watching her, clear-eyed and present. How long? He asked, his voice rough. 3 days. You had a fever. I was so worried. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. I thought you might die, and I realized I could not bear it. I have only known you a little more than a week. But the thought of a world without you in it felt unbearable. Quinn's eyes widened. Beatrice, let me finish. She took a shaky breath. I know this is improper. I know I should not feel this way about a man I barely know. But I do. You have been kinder to me, more protective of me, more genuinely concerned for my welfare than any man I have ever known. You risked your life for strangers. You brought me here to keep me safe. And you have never once treated me as anything less than your equal. Even though I am just a city woman who knows nothing of survival in the wilderness. You are more than that. Quinn's voice was stronger now. You are brave and strong and good. These past days, you have cared for me without complaint. You have kept me alive. He struggled to sit up, when she helped him, adjusting the furs around his shoulders. I have been alone for so long. I forgot what it felt like to have someone care whether I lived or died. You have reminded me. You have made me want more than just surviving day to day. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his palm rough against her skin. I am falling in love with you, Beatrice Kendall. Maybe I started falling the first time I saw you through that train window, helping that old woman with her blankets. Maybe it happened when you looked at me without fear, without judgment. I do not know when it started, but I know I do not want it to stop. Beatrice felt tears sliding down her cheeks. I am falling in love with you too. It is terrifying and wonderful and completely impractical. My family would be horrified. Society would be scandalized. But I do not care. I have never felt this way before, and I do not want to lose it. Quinn pulled her closer, slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She did not. When his lips met hers, it was gentle at first, tentative, then deeper, more certain. His beard was soft against her skin, and she could taste the coffee she had given him earlier. Her hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling the steady thunder of his heartbeat beneath her palms. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. I want to do this properly. When I am healed, when you are ready, I want to court you the right way. We are alone in a cabin in the wilderness, and you are worried about propriety now? She laughed, breathless and giddy. Yes, because you deserve that. You deserve to be courted and cherished and treated with honor. His eyes were serious. I may live like an animal in these mountains, but I was raised to respect women. My mother would come back from the grave and thrash me if I dishonored you. The mention of his mother sobered them both. Beatrice drew back slightly, though she kept her hand on his chest. Tell me about your family. So he did. He told her about growing up in Kentucky, about his mother who had raised 5 rough boys with an iron will and a loving heart, about his father who had taught him to hunt and track and read the weather, about his brothers, scattered now by war and westward expansion. Do you ever see them? She asked. Not in years. Letters sometimes, when I go to town for supplies. They know where I am, more or less. He smiled slightly. They would like you. Ma always said I needed a woman with a strong backbone to keep me in line. I shall have to meet them then. You would do that? Come back here to these mountains, to this simple life. Beatrice considered the question seriously. I do not know yet. My family needs me. My sister needs me. But I also know that what I feel for you is rare and precious. I will not throw it away out of fear or concern for what others think. Quinn kissed her again, slower this time, savoring. Then we will figure it out. Together. On the 12th day since the train had been stranded, the sound of shovels and voices carried through the clear mountain air. Beatrice and Quinn, who had been sitting by the fire while he continued to recover, both stood and moved to the window. Rescue, Quinn said quietly. Beatrice felt a complicated tangle of emotions. Relief that the other passengers would be saved. Worry for Mrs. Patterson and the others who had been ill. And beneath it all, a sharp stab of loss. Once rescue came, this idyll in the mountains would end. She would have to return to the real world, to obligations and expectations and the judgment of society. We should go to them, she said finally. Quinn nodded, though his expression was grim. They dressed warmly and made the journey back to the train together, moving slowly because of Quinn's injuries. As they crested the last ridge, Beatrice could see the scene below. A work crew had broken through the snowdrifts, and passengers were being helped off the train and loaded onto sledges. She could see Mrs. Patterson being assisted by two men, wrapped in blankets and looking frail but alive. The sight filled her with relief. The conductor spotted them approaching and hurried over, his face lighting up with recognition. "Miss Kendall, we feared the worst when you did not return. And Quinn, good to see you. These people owe you their lives, friend." "They are all well?" Quinn asked. "Weak and hungry, but alive thanks to the meat you brought. We lost no one, which is a miracle given the circumstances." The conductor turned to Beatrice. "Your family will be relieved to hear you are safe, miss. We will have you on your way to Denver within the day." Beatrice felt Quinn stiffen beside her. She reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his in full view of the conductor and any passengers who cared to look. "Actually, I will not be continuing to Denver just yet," she said clearly. "I need to send a telegram to my sister explaining the delay. But I will be staying in the nearest town for a time." The conductor's eyebrows rose, and his gaze dropped to their joined hands. "I see. Well, the nearest town is Truckee. Not much there, but there is a hotel and a telegraph office. That will be sufficient." They rode one of the sledges down to the town with several other passengers, including Mrs. Patterson. The old woman caught Beatrice's eye and smiled knowingly, but said nothing. At the hotel, a modest two-story building that served the railroad workers and occasional travelers, Beatrice secured a room while Quinn waited downstairs. She sent a telegram to her sister explaining that she had been delayed but was safe and would visit as soon as she was able. Then she sent another to her parents in San Francisco, assuring them of her well-being and asking for their patience regarding some important decisions she needed to make. When she returned to the lobby, she found Quinn talking with a man in a suit who was gesturing animatedly. As she approached, she caught the tail end of the conversation. "I am authorized to offer you a reward, Mr. Quinn. The railroad is grateful for your assistance during this crisis. Without your hunting skills, we would have lost passengers. Name your price." Quinn looked uncomfortable. "Did not do it for money. Nevertheless, the company insists. Shall we say $500? Beatrice saw Quinn's eyes widen slightly. $500 was a significant sum, enough to keep a man comfortable for a year or more if he was careful. "Make it $300, Quinn said. "And donate the other $200 to whatever charity supports widows and orphans in this territory." The railroad man blinked in surprise, but nodded. "Very well. Admirable of you, sir. I will have the funds transferred to the bank here in Truckee by week's end." After the man left, Beatrice turned to Quinn. "That was generous of you. Do not need much, and there are people who need it more." He shifted his weight, still obviously uncomfortable with the attention. "Beatrice, about your staying here. You do not have to. I know you have obligations." "I want to," she interrupted. "Quinn, I meant what I said in the cabin. I am not ready to walk away from this, from you. I need time to understand what this is, what it could be." He looked at her with such hope and longing that her heart ached. "How much time do you have?" "As much as we need. My sister's baby is not due for another month. I can spare a few weeks at least." "A few weeks." He smiled, that rare, transforming smile. "Then let me court you properly, Beatrice Kendall. Let me show you who I am when I am not just trying to keep people alive." Over the next 3 weeks, Quinn did exactly that. He took a room at a boarding house so that Beatrice's reputation would not be completely destroyed, though they spent every day together. He showed her the mountains he loved, teaching her to read animal tracks in the snow and identify the calls of different birds. He took her to his cabin again, this time in daylight and clear weather, and she saw the beauty of the wilderness through his eyes. They talked about everything. He told her more about the war, about the things he had seen that had driven him into isolation. She told him about the suffocating expectations of San Francisco society, the endless rounds of parties and social calls that had always felt hollow to her. "I was engaged once," she admitted one afternoon as they sat by a frozen creek, watching the sunlight sparkle on the ice. "To a man my parents approved of. He was wealthy, educated, from a good family. Everything a match should be on paper. What happened? I realized I did not love him. More than that, I did not even like him very much. He was dismissive of my opinions, condescending about my interests. He wanted a wife who would be decorative and obedient and undemanding." She picked up a stone and tossed it onto the ice, where it skittered and slid. "I broke the engagement 3 months before the wedding. My mother did not speak to me for weeks." Quinn took her hand, warming it between both of his. "It was brave of you. Many women would not have had the courage. I do not know about brave. Stubborn, maybe. Unwilling to settle for a life that felt like a cage." She looked at him. "This, what we have, it is the opposite of that. With you I feel free." He leaned in and kissed her, soft and sweet, and she felt that now familiar spark of heat and connection that made the rest of the world fade away. They were not always alone in their courtship. Mrs. Patterson, who had also stayed in Truckee to recover her strength before continuing her journey, became an unexpected chaperone and ally. She would join them for dinners at the hotel or sit with Beatrice in the evenings, regaling them with stories of her own youth and her late husband. "You remind me of my Thomas," she told Quinn one evening. "Strong, quiet, but with a good heart. He was not educated, not refined by society's standards, but he loved me fiercely, and he gave me 50 years of happiness." She patted Beatrice's hand. "Do not let them talk you out of this, child. True love is too rare to sacrifice on the altar of propriety." Beatrice hugged the old woman, grateful for her understanding. As the weeks passed, Beatrice's feelings for Quinn only deepened. She saw how he interacted with the townspeople, always respectful, always willing to help. She saw how he treated her, with a combination of protectiveness and respect that made her feel valued in a way she never had before. And she saw the way he looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention, with wonder and longing and something close to awe. 1 month after the train had been rescued, Quinn took her back to his cabin. They had made the journey several times now, and Beatrice had grown skilled at navigating the snowy terrain. This time, though, Quinn seemed nervous, fidgeting with his coat and checking the straps on his pack repeatedly. "Is something wrong?" she asked as they approached the cabin. "No. Yes, maybe." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Beatrice, I need to ask you something, but I am afraid of your answer." Her heart began to pound. "What is it?" He took both her hands in his, and she could feel the slight tremor in his grip. "I know this is fast. I know we have only known each other a little over a month. But I have lived alone for 6 years, and in that time I have learned to trust my instincts. My instincts tell me that you are the woman I've been waiting for, the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with." "Quinn." She could barely breathe. "I love you, Beatrice. I love your courage and your kindness. I love the way you see the world, with wonder and practicality in equal measure. I love how you make me want to be better, do better." He took a shaky breath. "I am not a man of means. I can offer you a simple life, a hard life in many ways. But I can promise you will always be warm and fed and safe. I can promise I will love you every day for the rest of my life. And I can promise that if you say yes, I will spend every moment trying to make you as happy as you make me." He released one of her hands and reached into his pocket, withdrawing a ring. It was simple, a silver band with a small blue stone set in the center. This was my grandmother's. It is all I have of value besides my rifle and my knife. Beatrice Kendall, will you marry me? Tears streamed down Beatrice's face. She had known this was coming, had felt it building in every conversation, every shared glance. But hearing the words, seeing the ring, made it real in a way that stole her breath. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, yes, Quinn, I will marry you. His whoop of joy echoed off the mountains. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around despite his still healing shoulder, and kissed her so thoroughly that they were both dizzy when he finally set her down. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. I cannot believe you said yes, he murmured against her hair. I was so afraid you would choose your family, your old life. My family will adjust, and my old life never felt like mine anyway. She pulled back to look at him. This is where I belong, with you. They spent the rest of the day at the cabin, making plans for their future. Quinn wanted to marry as soon as possible, but Beatrice insisted on traveling to San Francisco first to tell her parents in person and collect her things. They deserve to hear it from me, she explained, and I need to face them, to make them understand this is my choice, not something I am being forced into. Do you want me to come with you? Quinn asked, though she could see the thought of San Francisco intimidated him. No, this is something I need to do alone. But I will come back, I promise. Wait for me. I would wait forever if you asked me to. The journey back to San Francisco was bittersweet. Beatrice stopped first in Denver to visit her sister, who was delighted to see her and shocked by her news. You are engaged? To a mountain man? Her sister, Catherine, stared at the ring on Beatrice's finger as if it might bite her. Bea, have you lost your mind? No, I have found it, actually. Beatrice smiled at her sister's obvious concern. I know it sounds mad, but Catherine, I love him. He is good and kind and strong, and he makes me happier than I ever thought possible. Catherine studied her face for a long moment, then sighed. You do look happy, happier than I have ever seen you, but mother and father are going to have fits. I know, but I am 23 years old, and I am entitled to make my own choices about my life. Her sister pulled her into a hug. Then I am happy for you. And I cannot wait to meet this man who has captured your heart. San Francisco was harder. Beatrice's parents listened to her explanation with increasing horror, and her mother actually fainted when Beatrice showed them the ring. A mountain man. Her father repeated, his voice tight with anger. You have thrown away every advantage, every opportunity, for some wilderness savage who cannot even provide you with a proper home. He is not a savage, father. He is educated, well-read, and more genuinely honorable than any man I have met in your social circles. Beatrice kept her voice steady, though inside she was shaking. I am not asking for your permission. I am informing you of my decision. Then you are no daughter of mine, her mother said coldly from the sofa where she had been revived with smelling salts. The words struck like a physical blow, but Beatrice did not back down. If that is your choice, then I am sorry. But I will not live my life trying to please you at the expense of my own happiness. She stayed in San Francisco for 2 weeks, packing her belongings and saying goodbye to friends. A few of her closer acquaintances were shocked but supportive. Most were scandalized. The gossip spread through society like wildfire, and Beatrice found herself cut from guest lists and whispered about at every turn. she did not care. With each day that passed, she missed Quinn more. She missed the quiet of the mountains, the simplicity of life in the cabin. She missed his laugh and his rare smiles, and the way he looked at her as if she was the most precious thing in his world. Finally, her trunks packed and her affairs in order, she boarded the train back to Nevada and then California. The journey felt endless, but when she finally stepped off the train in Truckee, Quinn was there, waiting on the platform. He looked just as she remembered, tall and powerful in his furs and buckskins, his hair pulled back and his beard neatly trimmed. When he saw her, his face lit up with such joy that she dropped her carpetbag and ran to him, not caring who saw or what they thought. He caught her in his arms, lifting her off her feet, and buried his face in her hair. "You came back. God, I missed you. I told you I would. Did you doubt me?" "Every day," he admitted. "Feared you would realize you could do better, that you deserved more than I could give you. You are everything I want." She pulled back to look at him. "When can we be married?" He grinned. "Tomorrow, if you want. I already talked to the minister in town. He is willing to perform the ceremony whenever you are ready. Tomorrow, then. I do not want to wait any longer." They were married the next day in the small church in Truckee, with Mrs. Patterson and a few townspeople as witnesses. Beatrice wore a simple blue dress that matched her eyes, and Quinn had borrowed a proper suit from the boarding house owner, though he looked uncomfortable in the unfamiliar clothing. The ceremony was brief and traditional. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Quinn kissed her with such tenderness that Beatrice felt tears slip down her cheeks. This was right. This was where she was meant to be. They spent their wedding night in the hotel, the first time they had been truly alone together as husband and wife. Quinn was gentle and patient, taking his time to ensure her comfort and pleasure. Beatrice had been nervous, but his care and obvious love for her made everything feel natural and right. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Beatrice's head on Quinn's chest as she listened to his heartbeat. "No regrets?" he asked softly, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "Not one." She tilted her head up to kiss his jaw. "You? Only that I did not find you sooner." They returned to the cabin 2 days later, beginning their life together in earnest. The winter was long and cold, but Beatrice found she did not mind. She learned to cook on the fireplace, to preserve meat and vegetables, to tan hides and make soap. Quinn taught her to shoot, and while she would never be as skilled as he was, she became proficient enough to defend herself if needed. In the spring, they traveled down to Truckee together to purchase supplies and collect the reward money that Quinn had never bothered to claim. He used part of it to buy Beatrice a new dress, fabric for curtains, and a set of china plates that made her cry because she knew how much the gesture meant. "Want you to have nice things," he said, looking embarrassed by her tears. "Want you to be happy here." "I am happy. The happiest I have ever been." And it was true. Life in the mountains was hard work, but it was also deeply satisfying. She woke each morning in Quinn's arms, spent her days building a home with him, and fell asleep each night, feeling loved and valued in a way she never had in San Francisco. Summer brought unexpected news. Beatrice's sister Catherine arrived by train with her new baby, a healthy boy named Thomas, and her husband. They stayed for 2 weeks in Truckee, and Beatrice brought them to the cabin to meet Quinn properly. Catherine's husband, Richard, was skeptical at first, but Quinn won him over with his quiet competence and obvious devotion to Beatrice. By the time they left, Catherine was hugging Beatrice tight and whispering, "You were right. He is perfect for you." Even more surprising, a letter arrived from Beatrice's father that fall. It was stiff and formal, but it invited them to San Francisco for Christmas if they wished to come. Her mother had included a separate note, brief but sincere, apologizing for her harsh words and asking to be given a chance to know her son-in-law. "Do you want to go?" Quinn asked, studying the letters with trepidation. "I think we should. They are trying in their way, and I want them to see how happy we are." The trip to San Francisco was nerve-wracking for Quinn, who had not been in a city since before the war. But he endured it for Beatrice's sake, even donning a proper suit and sitting through interminable dinners with her parents and their friends. To everyone's surprise, Beatrice's father and Quinn found common ground in their shared experience of the war. They spent hours in her father's study, talking in low voices about things neither would discuss with anyone else. And her mother, while never entirely comfortable with the match, began to thaw when she saw how Quinn looked at her daughter, with devotion and respect and unmistakable love. By the time they returned to the mountains in January, Beatrice felt as if a weight had been lifted. Her family had not disowned her after all, and while they might never fully understand her choice, they were willing to accept it. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Quinn continued to hunt and trap, though he no longer lived as a complete hermit. They made regular trips to Truckee for supplies and socializing, and the cabin often hosted visitors. Other mountain men passing through, travelers caught by weather, even the occasional railroad official checking on their welfare. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. Quinn was beside himself with joy and terror in equal measure, alternately grinning like a fool and worrying about everything that could go wrong. "Women have babies all the time," Beatrice told him, amused by his anxiety. "I will be fine. But out here, so far from a doctor. Then we will go to Truckee when my time gets close. We will stay at the hotel, and I will have the best medical care available." That was exactly what they did. When Beatrice's pains began in late October, they were already settled in Truckee, and a capable midwife attended the birth. After 12 hours of labor, Beatrice delivered a healthy baby boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. Quinn held his son with shaking hands, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "He is perfect. You are perfect. Thank you." They named him James, after Quinn's father, and brought him back to the cabin when he was 2 weeks old. Quinn proved to be a devoted father, taking to the role as naturally as he did everything else. He carved toys for James, sang him lullabies in a surprisingly good baritone, and would spend hours simply watching the baby sleep. 2 years later, a daughter joined their family, a tiny thing with auburn hair and Quinn's gray eyes. They named her Rose, and she proved to have a fierce temperament that kept both her parents on their toes. Beatrice's parents visited that summer, making the difficult journey to meet their grandchildren. Watching her mother hold Rose while her father taught James to identify bird calls, Beatrice felt a sense of completion. Her life had come full circle in the best possible way. Years passed. James grew tall and strong like his father, while Rose proved to have her mother's practical nature and her father's love of the wilderness. They had 2 more children, another son they named William, and a daughter called May. And the cabin expanded to accommodate their growing family. Quinn never lost his protective nature, but he softened in other ways. He laughed more, worried less, and seemed genuinely content in a way he never had been before. On quiet evenings, after the children were asleep, he and Beatrice would sit before the fire as they had in those early days, her head on his shoulder and his arms around her. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked him one such evening, nearly 10 years after they had first met. Giving up your solitude. Taking on a family? Quinn tightened his arms around her. Not for a single moment. You gave me something I did not even know I was missing. You gave me a home, a family, a reason to wake up every morning grateful to be alive. He kissed the top of her head. I love you more now than I did the day we married. And I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is my promise to you. Beatrice tilted her face up to his. And I love you, my mountain man. Thank you for saving me from that train. Thank you for seeing past the rough edges to the man underneath. They kissed, a familiar comfort and the enduring passion. And Beatrice thought about how strange life was. She had boarded a train heading to Denver and had ended up stranded in a blizzard. She had been rescued by a rough mountain man who had hunted elk to keep her from starving, and in the process, she had found a love deeper and truer than anything she had imagined possible. As the fire crackled and the wind whispered through the pines outside, Beatrice closed her eyes and smiled. She was exactly where she belonged, with exactly the man she was meant to love. And that, she thought, was the greatest adventure of all. The children grew into capable, confident adults. James eventually took over much of the hunting and trapping from his aging father, while Rose surprised everyone by becoming a skilled healer, learning from the local indigenous tribes and combining their knowledge with what she could glean from medical texts. William proved to have a talent for business and began negotiating better prices for the furs and game his family brought to market. And May, the youngest, inherited her mother's love of learning and spent hours reading every book she could get her hands on. Quinn's hair grayed and his movements slowed slightly, but he remained strong and vital well into his 50s. Beatrice aged too, her auburn hair turning silver and lines appearing around her eyes from years of laughter and mountain sun. But Quinn still looked at her the way he had that first day in the engine car, with wonder and devotion. And she still felt her heart skip when he smiled. Their children eventually married and started families of their own. James brought home a spirited young woman named Anna, who proved to be as capable in the wilderness as any of them. Rose married a railroad engineer who was happy to settle in Truckee to be near her family. William moved to San Francisco for a time, but returned with a wife who loved the mountains as much as he did. And May, their baby, married a teacher and opened a school in Truckee, ensuring the children of the region had access to education. Beatrice's parents passed away within a year of each other, her father first from a heart ailment, and her mother simply seeming to lose the will to live without him. Beatrice mourned them, grateful that they had reconciled and that her last memories of them were warm ones. Her sister Catherine remained a constant presence in her life, visiting when she could and exchanging long letters when she could not. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Quinn surprised Beatrice by taking her back to the exact spot where he had first proposed. The cabin had been expanded over the years, but this place, a small clearing with a view of the valley below, remained unchanged. 20 years, he marveled, holding both her hands in his. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like you have been mine forever. I have been yours forever, Beatrice corrected gently. Even before we met, I was just waiting to find you. He pulled out a package wrapped in cloth and handed it to her. Inside was a necklace, delicate silver chain with a pendant shaped like an elk. To remember how it all started, he said. A blizzard, a stranded train, and a hungry city woman who needed someone to hunt for her. Beatrice laughed through her tears. And a stubborn mountain man who could not bear to let strangers starve. Best decision I ever made, going to that train. He fastened the necklace around her neck. "You are still the most beautiful thing I have ever seen, Beatrice Quinn, and I love you more with every year that passes." They stayed at that clearing until sunset, talking about their children and grandchildren, reminiscing about their early days together, and making plans for the years to come. Those years were sweet. Quinn and Beatrice settled into a comfortable routine, spending winters in Truckee near their growing family and summers at the cabin that held so many memories. They watched their grandchildren grow, teaching them the skills Quinn had once taught Beatrice: how to read the forest, how to respect the wilderness, how to build a life with your own hands. Quinn passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 68, with Beatrice beside him and his children and grandchildren filling the cabin they had built together. His last words were, "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for loving me. You made my life worth living." Beatrice mourned deeply, but without regret. She had been granted nearly 30 years with the love of her life, had built a family and a legacy that would endure long after she was gone. She lived another 5 years after Quinn's death, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, writing down the story of how she and Quinn had met so future generations would know. She passed away on a clear winter morning, looking out at the mountains she had come to love, and those who found her swore there was a smile on her face. James found his mother's writings a week later. Dozens of pages covered in her careful handwriting, telling the story of a blizzard and a train and a mountain man who had saved her life and stolen her heart. He gathered his siblings and read it aloud. And by the end, there was not a dry eye in the room. "They really loved each other," May said wonderingly. "I mean, we knew it, but hearing it like this..." "They did," James agreed. "And they built something beautiful together. A family, a home, a legacy of courage and kindness." Rose touched the elk pendant that Beatrice had worn every day since Quinn gave it to her, and which now lay among her mother's effects. "We should keep this safe, pass it down, so every generation knows the story." And that was what they did. The pendant became a family heirloom, passed from mother to daughter, along with the story of Beatrice and Quinn. The cabin remained in the family, carefully maintained and cherished. And every year, on the anniversary of the day the blizzard stranded the train, the descendants of Beatrice Kendall and Kade Quinn would gather to tell the story again of how two souls found each other in the midst of a storm and built a love that lasted not just a lifetime, but generations. The mountains themselves seemed to remember. The trail to the cabin became known as Quinn's Path, and the clearing where he had proposed was called Kendall's View. Travelers passing through would sometimes report seeing a tall man in furs and a woman with auburn hair walking hand in hand through the snow, smiling at each other as if they shared the most wonderful secret in the world. Whether these sightings were real or simply the romance of the story taking hold in people's imaginations did not really matter. What mattered was that Beatrice and Kade Quinn's love story endured, a testament to the fact that true love could be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the greatest adventures began with a train stranded in a blizzard and a mountain man brave enough to venture into a storm to save strangers. Their story became legend in the Sierra Nevada, told and retold until fact and folklore blended together. But at its heart, the truth remained simple and powerful. Two people from different worlds had found each other, had chosen each other against all odds, and had built something beautiful that lasted long after they were gone. And in the end, what more could anyone ask for than that? A great love, a life well lived, and a legacy of kindness and courage that inspired generations to come. Beatrice and Kade Quinn had found all of that and more, starting with a simple act of compassion in the midst of a winter storm. The mountains stood eternal, snow-capped and magnificent, holding the memories of a mountain man and the city woman he loved, and the family they built together in the wilderness. And somewhere in those mountains, if you listened carefully on a quiet winter night, you might hear the echo of laughter, the murmur of loving voices, and the whisper of a story that proved love could conquer any obstacle, survive any storm, and endure forever.